Now, for more on the latest developments from this week's African Union Summit, I am joined by my colleague, East Africa correspondent, Gabe Joselow, who joins us live from the Kenyan capital, Nairobi, via Skype. Good evening, Gabe.
Good evening, Shaka. How are you?
I am terrific. Now, I know that you just got back from the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa. Could you please give us a sense as to how the summit finally settled on the new boss for the African Union Commission?
Yeah, well, as you know, I mean, it was a pretty tough battle between Dlamini-Zuma and Jean Ping. It started last year at the summit, I should say earlier this year in January, at the last AU summit. They went round after round after round, and neither candidate gained enough votes to actually win the chairmanship. This year it was actually the same thing. For the first three rounds, neither candidate gained enough votes. Jean Ping in the third round lost enough that he was disqualified essentially, and Dlamini-Zuma went away with it with 37 votes. So it was the same battle as it was before, where you had countries that were divided along linguistic lines, with French-speaking countries supporting Jean Ping and English-speaking countries supporting Zuma, with a few exceptions. But eventually, I think the overall sense was that after such a long stalemate, with so much to do, with so much on the agenda, delegates were really ready to move on, to elect somebody, and to get the African Union Commission up and running again, and ready to face these many challenges.
You talk about the differences between the Anglophone and Francophone countries. What about the Lusophonic countries?
Yeah, you didn't hear too much out of them during the summit, but yeah, they certainly have their say as well.
So what do you think that at the end of the day may have actually made the difference in the favor of the South African candidate?
Well, Dlamini-Zuma and the South African delegates were really campaigning hard for this position. They've been going at this for years, trying to make sure they brought on as many people and promised to be as inclusive as possible. At the same time, there were some indications or some suspicions that they may have been strong-arming a little bit. The Kenyan delegation suggested that maybe they were bullying a little bit, as in letting countries know that if they didn't support her in this process, that they might not be treated favorably if she became the chairperson. It's hard to confirm any of this, and it's a secret ballot, so you don't really know which countries switched sides after the third round of voting. But you did see, but there's also, like I was saying, a consensus that it's time to move on. It's time to accept somebody as the AU chair. And so I think basically frustration with the stalemate was probably one of the biggest deciding factors.
What about the issue of the International Criminal Court or the ICC, Gabe? To what extent could that, in fact, at the end of the day, have been a factor? Because we do know, for example, that the former boss, that is Jean Ping from Gabon, has actually been pushing for a sort of diluting the role of the ICC, especially when it comes to the issue of African leaders who have allegedly committed crimes against humanity. And yet we do know that that South African president, Jacob Zuma, is on record at one time having said that if Sudanese president Omar al-Bashir were to fly the South African airspace, he would be arrested and be handed over to the ICC.
Yeah, I think that's a very important distinction between the two candidates. And I think evidence of the concern that South Africa would be too much in favor of supporting the ICC is the fact that the deputy chairperson, Erastus Mwencha of Kenya, received such outstanding support for the position, even though winning 50 out of 51 votes, I should say. Even though that means there would be two English speakers in control of the African Union Commission. And of course, Kenya, with its politicians facing trial at the ICC, are against an African Union that would be supportive of the ICC against states that might arrest candidates if they come back. So I think at the same time, it's hard to say what Dlamini-Zuma is really going to do about the ICC. She hasn't given any indication that she would support empowering it or loosen the African Union's sort of resistance to ICC's power on the continent. So that really remains to be seen. But you're right in that South Africa has before said they would arrest President Bashir. So has Malawi, for the record. It is an important issue and something that we are going to watch. Again, also important to note that really it's the African Union Peace and Security Commission that decides a lot of the policy. While Dlamini-Zuma, could try to have her say and force a position there, it's not necessarily up to her to decide the African Union's stance towards the ICC.
Well, thank you so much, Gabe, for that insight, and have a terrific time in Nairobi.
Thank you.